Awesome. Guten Abend, Andy.
Oh, guten Abend. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. I trust you're doing okay too here in the UK lockdown.
I'm doing all right. Yeah, all good. I got a new puppy to keep me occupied. So
very good. Yeah. So you're going to be finding random random lumps of poo all over your house at the moment. Then.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. All good fun.
Somebody who's not in the midst of a UK lockdown is Joe, because the lucky so-and-so has swaned off to Barbados to have his lockdown over there. So
he timed that rather well, didn't he?
He's timed that very well, yes. Yeah. So we'll mention at the end of the episode how you can support Joe's holiday fund by logging onto our Patreon account at Redline, because those flights certainly aren't cheap. But in the meantime, we have he is going to dial in instantly in a minute, which is very kind of him.
Yeah, just to say hello on his sunbed.
Yeah, we have a very interesting guest lined up here, and it's a really, I don't know, it's a funny topic for people, isn't it? But this is actually going to be far more interesting than what people might think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit like our insurance podcast that we did. And we thought it was going to be a bit of a dry sort of experience. But I think it's going to be really interesting to find out more about the subject of tyres.
Yes, and the chap we're speaking to, Andy, is Karl, is it?
It is, Karl Naylor. He is from a company called I can never say it, and we will ask him actually how to pronounce it. It's I think it's Vredestein. It's a Dutch company, and the reason that I approached them is that I have their tyres on my wife's XC40, and I also have them on my Audi A2, and I've got all season tyres, which I think are just fantastic. And I'm a bit of a sort of a preacher. And I thought, as it's now the time when everybody's thinking, "Oh, how are my tyres for winter?" It's probably a good time to talk tyres.
Definitely.
Now, Karl's been in the industry for years. He's worked for Michelin. Currently works for this Dutch company that I need to come up. We've got that little thing that we use for our little local group, the Fruit Stick Group.
Yeah,
I need to come up with something like that for this company name so that I remember it. He's been in the industry for a lot of years, so I think he's going to impart a lot of information to us.
Yes, he's a very, very, very knowledgeable chap, and we've got a series of good questions lined up. So yes, I think if you're listening at home, get ready, because this is going to be a good one. You're going to find out lots about tyres, most of which we guarantee you didn't know. And then at the end, we also mention our first Road to Redline giveaway, isn't it? Our first prize giveaway.
Yes. Yeah. So in the next week, you need to keep a lookout on Instagram for some posts. We'll be doing a number of posts over the week with details of how you can win a set of tyres, which pretty epic and a good set of tyres. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Well, look, let's get Karl on and let's tip Joe off his sun lounger somewhere in Barbados, and let's talk winter tyres.
All right, let's do it. Karl Naylor, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure.
I think first off, we should say, how do we actually pronounce the company name you're from? Because I make it up every time, and I say something different every time.
Yeah, it's one of those things I come across quite a lot, especially in the UK. Amongst the dedicated dealer network, we have various ways that the British accent will pronounce it or read it. I would say personally, in English, I would say Vredestein. So it's the word red with a V in the front. Vredestein, Stein, like a big glass of beer in Germany, Stein.
Excellent. I've not been too far off then.
No, but if you were Dutch, you might pronounce it more like Vredestein, and you wouldn't want to do that in a pub conversation. And just like, somebody with Germanic would say words differently. I'm sure you see the same with Porsche or Porsche, and different people saying it in different ways depending on where they're from. But yeah, we get Vredestein, we get Vredi, we get all sorts of things,
Absolutely.
And once people have got it sort of in their mind, they can't change it.
It sticks. Yeah, there's probably 50,000 different ways of saying it. So we got you on today because I've been using your tyres on my daily hacks for a while. And I just reached out to Vredestein. I still can't say it. I reached out to you guys just to see if somebody would be interested to come on and give us a rundown on sort of winter tyres, because I'm a real convert to them, and whether we've got any other sort of tyre questions as well. I started off, I think it was about 6 years ago. I bought some second-hand wheels, and they came with a set of winter tyres on them. I'd never experienced them before, never thought I needed them. That winter was a particularly snowy winter, and I was just amazed at what they could do. Actually had an accident in the car because I probably got a little bit overconfident, but they were just amazing.
Great advert, Andy.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't my fault. Somebody drove into me. But yeah, they probably didn't realise how confident I was. But there you go. So yeah, I've had a full set of winters, and recently I've gone over to using all season tyres. So my wife's got an XC40, and we were going away to Austria for Christmas a couple of years ago, and the car comes on summer tyres. I looked into it and found out that I needed something that had snow capabilities on. Found the tyres all seasons, and they've been on the car since, and I've now got them on my daily little Audi A2, and they're just epic. So yeah, really interested to find out what makes a all season tyre winter tyre. And why should everybody have them rather than summer tyres? Because most people in the UK do have summer tyres.
Well, first of all, let me start by saying thank you for having me on. It's quite a rare pleasure because it's interesting that lots of car enthusiasts and experts and motoring magazines and motoring television programs very, very rarely talk about tyres and focus on tyres, which is strange when you think about when you start to look at motorsport and you look at rally drivers, Formula One drivers, any track day drivers. They'll all tell you that it doesn't matter what you've got under the bonnet or what sort of brakes you've got. If you haven't got the right tyres on for the right surface in the right conditions, you're not going to win. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a boring subject to some people. It's a bit like talking about what brand of brakes have you got or something. It's become commoditized, I think, over the last 20 or so years. But right now we're seeing a huge shift, at least in the UK market, a huge shift, which is increasing people's awareness a little bit because this new thing has come up that is all season tyres. Yeah. I say new in inverted commas because we've been making all-season tyres for nearly 30 years now. We were one of the first in the market to start doing it, but most of the other mainstream manufacturers in the last 4 or 5 years have started making an all-season product. And the reasons for that, and I'll answer your question about how it does it. I think we can get into some detail on that. It depends how technical you want to be, but in the UK and in other northern European markets, northern France, Spain, even our home country of the Netherlands, we've seen less and less harsher winters. And in the UK particularly, we've never really succeeded in selling winter tyres as a market in the same way that they do in other countries. In other countries, as you'll know, it's a legal requirement during certain months of the year to have a winter-capable tyre. That makes people a little bit more conscious of the performance of the product, the performance of what tyres they've got on. So they'll read magazines and look for, each season change. There'll be summer tyre tests and winter tyre tests, the latest models of tyres that have been produced. And that affects the market. You can actually see, more successful sales years when you've won when you've won podium places in those tyre tests. You don't see that in the UK, and mainly because the vast majority of the public think a summer tyre is a normal tyre. A summer tyre is just a tyre. And that's the way we all grew up, and we didn't know any different. And I, like you, even though I started in the tyre industry nearly 25 years ago, it was only probably 10, maybe 15 years ago, the first time I actually experienced what you just experienced. I was driving a rear-wheel drive 5 Series, and we had one of those, I think I can't remember the exact year, but when around the turn, the 2009, 10, 11, we had 2 or 3 bad winters in a row.
Yes, yeah.
Airports were closed with snow, Heathrow and Gatwick had problems, it was all over the country. And I'd had 1 year in this car where I couldn't get off the drive. I was driving the wife's Tiguan because I literally couldn't. I live in Buxton in North Derbyshire, so if it snows there. And I was stranded in my own house working from home for a good few weeks. And if I needed to get out, I stole her 4-wheel drive. The following year, I put on a set of winter tyres and couldn't believe the difference. Just couldn't believe the way the car handled. And at Vredestein, it's something we've done for many years. We'll take customers to a test track where we have an epoxy resin sprayed with water that therefore has the grip coefficient of compact snow stroke ice. And we'll put them in 2 cars, one on summer tyres, one on winter tyres, and say, there you go, get around that corner, try braking, try avoiding an obstacle in the road.
Do you do that in the UK?
We don't. We take people out to our factory in Enschede in eastern Netherlands.
That sounds like a trip.
We have, we stop off in Amsterdam on a Saturday night on the way back. It's not a bad trip.
Book me in.
But the different. We've done similar things in the past. Myra, we used to do a really interesting thing when I worked in Michelin. We take people to Myra and put a set of new tyres on one axle and a set of part-worn, half-worn tyres on another axle, and take the dealers out there and actually show them what difference it made to the handling of the car. Only on a 30-mile-an-hour wet skid pan, they were off the ditches, they were all over the place, and really try and get best practice, because consumers don't have enough interest in tyres to educate themselves. Why would they? It's like, would you educate yourself about washing machines or another distressed purchase that you're going to buy every 2 or 3 years? So it's hard sometimes to get that level of education at the point of sale, that one time where they are interested, to sell them on product capability rather than just on price.
Yes,
But because I think a lot of it, then it helps.
Yeah, a lot of people in the UK do buy on price, I think, because the amount of cars that I've bought in the past that have just got the cheapest set of Chinese tyres on them, and just all over the place on the roads, and it's astounding how many cars out there are on just crap.
There's a few things, as I've said, I've been around a long time. There's a few theories I've got about that. I mean, we are probably one of the worst, if not the worst, market in Europe for that sort of behaviour. In the UK, we've got probably around about 50% of the total tyre sales market is budget. Yeah. With about a third of the market being premium, and then the sort of mid-range sitting with that 15 or 20% in the middle.
Wow.
And that's quite frightening. Now, budget tyres nowadays aren't as bad as they used to be. Nothing's going to go bang doing 70 miles an hour on the motorway just because it's not been built right.
Yeah.
But it's the extra performance, that dealers should sell the right tyre for the consumer that comes through the door. If they're driving a 10-year or 15-year-old Fiesta and all they do is drive to the shops and back a couple of times a week at 30 miles an hour, then why not sell a value product? There's no problem with that. But if somebody's driving in a, and I wouldn't even say supercar or sports car, but a 200 brake horsepower 2-litre diesel Audi needs more than just a basic standard tyre. It needs a tyre that's got a little bit of sports performance to it. And that 5, 10, 15% of performance when you need it most is where you get your money's worth. Because not everybody drives around on the edge of the performance envelope all the time, but it's when you need to brake, it's when you need to turn suddenly, it's when the weather's bad. That's when you're getting the premium you're paying for when you buy a better brand. The other thing is we are a nation of bargain hunters.
That's true.
I as I said, I worked for a very famous French tyre manufacturer, and some of our colleagues on the continent couldn't understand the dynamics of the market. And I used to say, well, imagine in a French Parisian wine bar, and I'm not racist, but at least stereotype here, a couple of French guys, talking to each other. One's admiring the other one's shirt, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, it's a designer brand. It cost me €200," and jump across to good old Britain in the local boozer, and the guys, saying, "Look at this, 3 for a tenner off the market." It says it's got a designer name in it, but I've paid nothing for it. There's a little bit of that going on, I think, in the British culture. And finally, it's about the retailers. Now, I don't want to denigrate my customers here, but it's a fairly low margin industry. So the people that are serving customers, they're not trained salespeople like you get in a car showroom. They are ultimately mechanics, tyre technicians that have learned how to fit and balance and mount tyres properly. But when they're then faced with a customer who drives in on a 2-year-old SUV, and the tyres are going to be 500 quid a corner, that's a little bit foreboding for maybe a 25-year-old guy that doesn't get paid that much a week. He's thinking that's a lot of money, and he's frightened of the price, so he starts lower. He says, "Oh, prices start from I can do you this price." And because the consumer's not particularly educated on brands, it's a perfect storm, and it pushes the market that way.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, there's probably more margin in the bottom end of the market. If you can bring a tyre in from China, you can market it up with a bit of trade marketing as a brand. You can make a bit more margin. The wholesalers make more margin out of it. The retailers make more margin out of it. So that's what they're going to recommend if you go in with no, preformed ideas of what you want to buy.
Yeah.
That is the three things that's pushed it that way. And I guess it's hard to educate consumers that aren't that interested in that topic. It's hard to tell dealers they should sell something better at lower margins, but really they should sell what's right for the consumer, what's best for them. So we've diverted off topic slightly there, but
I think it's a good subject, because I think I've been certainly guilty in the past of cheaping out on tyres. I think over the last few years I've learned that that's very much the wrong thing to do, because I've been put yourself into situations where the tyre's just not good enough for the car that you've been driving, the situation that you've been in. So yeah, definitely worth covering.
It's a bit about how perceptions and how you've grown up, isn't it? I mean, I grew up buying cheap cars.
Yeah.
That were only just roadworthy, keeping them roadworthy on a very tight budget. And you'd buy spare parts from a motor factor, pattern parts. You'd be spraying them out of a tin can. And you were buying tyres. If I'm talking now about, I don't know, Mark II Escort or something like that.
Showing your age there, Karl.
Original Mini before BMW bought them. And when you came to tyres, it was a similar attitude. You went to try and get the cheapest you could to be road legal. And now, 20 years later, those same teenagers have still got that same perception about how much a tyre is going to cost. And then somebody they're buying maybe a 4 or 5 year old, like I said, 2-litre diesel or a small SUV or something like that. And then they're shocked when they realise the tyres are 200, 300 quid upwards for a decent brand. But if they're happy to buy a Far Eastern brand that they've never heard of, it could be half that. Yeah. So that's where we're at.
I was going to say, what does it look like in terms of technology changes? I mean, you said, say the last 20 years, an example. Have things actually moved on that much, or is it a case of the technology's always been there and it's just become more accessible?
No, led by manufacturers that invest in R&D, we've constantly been moving forward. Couple of major changes. One is around rolling resistance. Tyre design and development is all about compromise. You can make a tyre that would last forever, but it wouldn't grip. You can make a tyre that would stick like the proverbial to a stick, but it wouldn't last very long. When you bring in noise, and latterly you bring in rolling resistance, which affects carbon dioxide emissions, use of fuel efficiency and carbon dioxide. And all those things have come in, driven by OEMs, so driven by the car manufacturers, always wanting to get their CO2 figures lower, wanted to get their noise figures lower, wanted to get their vehicles performing better. So R&D departments of Tyre manufacturers are constantly innovating and constantly making better. And when we eventually get back onto the subject of all seasons, that's prevalent there as well. So we've seen developments. Like I said, I could take one example: the use of silica in the tread compound in place of carbon black. Carbon black plays a certain role when you vulcanize rubber in a mold to turn it from being like a putty to being the rubber we would understand as being rubber of a tyre. Part of the chemical process and part of the chemicals that bind it all together is carbon black, soot, effectively carbon. And that has certain properties. And around about 15, 20 years ago, people started experimenting, replacing that with a compound called silica, which gave the tyres a lower rolling resistance. It absorbed less energy than carbon black.
Okay.
It's the way it links the long chains together, and it absorbs less energy. It also helps the tyre grip in colder conditions, which we'll come back to when we talk about winter tyres. So I remember the launch of a range of tyres by Michelin called the Michelin Energy, where we promoted them on, they will save you 5% fuel. That was a huge leap forward in technology. Other changes we've seen is a massive growth in rim diameter. And again, I'm going to show you here and talk about Marvel Escalades. But, you know, the type of cars that were everyday cars in those days were on 13-inch wheels.
Yeah, absolutely.
The biggest single size in the market was a size known as a 155/30. That fitted on, you know, most cars.
Yeah.
If you were driving something a little bit sporty, you were on 14-inch, 185/60, 14H rated. And if you were really up there, you know, driving something, you were maybe talking about 956/515V or 205/55/16V. So you had about 5 or 6 sizes that covered the whole market, or the vast majority of the market. Nowadays, we've got something in around about 1,000 different SKUs in our product range. For a retailer to stock maybe 1,000 tyres, you know, 800, 900,000 tyres, a specialist retailer to try and stock a range of tyres across a range of brands in popular sizes, is probably looking at upwards of 800, 900 tyres. And you will still only be covering around 90% of the market in terms of what might walk in the door. And it gets more so every year. So different sizes, different speed ratings, different load ratings. A question came up earlier about N markings, so we'll come back to that later, but the different OE specifications, run flats, extra load, and you've got all these variations, and then you've got a plethora of brands coming in from across, you know, the world. It's just made it, you know, very, very complex. So complex, I think, for the consumer to try. That's
what I think. Yeah, that's the thing. The complexity of it all. It's so. We could probably do a second podcast on tyres, going into the, you know, what's all the different numbers and codes and all that sort of thing to try and understand it all. Because you just look. Some days you look at.
I mean, it is quite simple when you know it, and that's the difference.
Yeah.
When you know something, it can look complicated, but it is quite simple. So, do you want to go back to winter and all season? Because I think that's
let's do that.
Probably the first question that I've still avoided answering.
That's right. Yeah, what makes a winter tyre? What's different to a summer tyre?
I have to talk a little bit about grip here, and I'm not a technician, but of course, when we develop tyres in the market, we turn what the technical guys tell us into marketing speak and sales patter. But to try and understand it, it's about the way a tyre grips the surface of the road. And when you let's talk about winter tyres before we go into all season. It's mainly to do with the tread. And when I say tread, there's several things. First of all, there's the tread pattern itself. When you look at a summer tyre versus a winter tyre, you'll see the biggest single difference is something called sipes. So these are very narrow cuts in every tread block. There might be 3 or 4 in every tread block, and they're usually
like a little wiggle, aren't they?
Yeah, they're either a wavy line or a zigzag line. And the best way I can describe that is a little bit like sometimes when it's a certain type of snow and you try and make a snowball with woolen gloves on, and by the time you've squeezed the snow together and you open your hands up, all the snow's stuck to your gloves and you know you haven't got a snowball. It's a little bit like that. It's that's those sipes what grip the surface of the snow, and the snow will grip to snow. So they are actually, as the tyre rolls around, the footprint of the tyre that touches the ground deforms slightly, it changes shape, and those sipes grip, they squeeze, a little bit like a set of tweezers, and there's thousands of them grabbing the tyre, grabbing the surface on every revolution. That's what gives the biggest difference.
What makes the grip then is the snow gripping the snow.
In certain conditions,
okay,
it can be. If you think about compact snow, you're never getting through to the road surface underneath or hard ice. You're actually got a grip to that surface. So that's about size. Another part of it is the compound staying softer. So I mentioned earlier silica. If you change the compound of rubber, more going away from natural rubber and having more synthetic rubber, having more silica than carbon black, you can make the rubber stay softer in colder temperatures. Okay. We normally talk about 7 degrees centigrade. When the average temperature gets below 7 degrees centigrade every day, you really will start to see that summer tyres are hard. And they're hard for most of the journey. They're never getting warm again. And again, go back to Formula One, and people talk about tyre temperatures. We've seen Formula One drivers going off the track in the first lap out of the pits because they haven't got the tyres warm, or when they have to slow down for a safety car and weaving in and out to keep the tyres warm. So same thing. If you're in cold temperature, you're driving in cold, wet roads or even slush or snow. If you're on normal summer rubber, let's say, it will go hard and it can't flex as much. It can't grip the road surface. It can't. The interaction between rubber and the asphalt doesn't happen because there's not enough flexibility in the blocks.
So there's an important thing there is a winter tyre is not just a snow tyre for going out in the snow and the ice. A winter tyre is because the temperatures come down and there's water on the road.
Yep.
And in the UK, that's
most of the year.
A hell of a lot of the time. Most of the year. So,
And the third area, still talking about compound, is the source of chemicals. And Lee asked the question earlier about progress over time. We've started to introduce, as well as silica, different polymers, different waxes, all in the mix of the rubber, which changes behaviour to try and increase cold grip whilst not losing wet grip, because the two aren't exactly the same. But also, and then we come back to all season, what we've done with all season is we've been able to stretch that compromise, that performance envelope, but still the compromise, so that we're not losing summer performance while still giving winter performance. You mentioned the sort of going abroad and the legal requirements. Winter tyres and all-season tyres, proper all-season tyres, will have something on the sidewall called the three-peak mounting snowflake. And it's exactly as I said. It's three little mounting peaks with a snowflake. And that's the legal requirement. That says it's winter capable. That says in those countries that have that regulation. And I can't speak for other manufacturers, but all of our all-season tyres also have three-peak mounting snowflake.
Yeah.
Which means people can put them on if they're going skiing in the winter or whatever, and not really about changing tyres.
That's exactly what we were doing in Austria. We were up, we were near, I can't remember where we were, but we were up this mountain, and it was hard packed snow all the way up this, probably about 4 or 5 miles, and big gradients. And we were on these all season tyres, and I don't think I had one sketchy moment. It was just unbelievable that these tyres could get you up there. I just didn't think it was possible. It was epic.
It is dramatic, the difference, definitely. And if you've ever driven in those sorts of conditions on summer tyres, especially summer tyres that are maybe half worn, so you've only got the 3 or 4 millimetres, they're not clearing as much in terms of water or slush. No, you drive to the kit, but you adjust your driving style a little bit, and that's what you said earlier is interesting, is when you start getting some people putting winter tyres on and others not, you're just as much in danger of you stop at the lights and the guy behind you doesn't. But when I see all season going, it's perfect for the UK climate, because all season is about maximising safety in unpredictable climates. Historically, you go back at quite a few years, and it was really smaller cars, larger performance cars across Europe. I'm not just talking UK now, but across Europe, larger, more powerful cars would change to winter tyres for the exact reason we've just discussed. They want to continue enjoying that car in colder winter months, so they would change to winter tyres and then change back again in March to summer tyres. We've not really seen that in the UK. It's been hard to convince consumers to change tyres twice a year, the rigmarole, the inconvenience and the cost. Where do you store the tyres or wheels? Because in Europe they'll also maybe swap wheels and go from a larger rim size to a smaller rim size. All season, now that we can say you can fit this, it will perform as well as a winter tyre in the winter, but you can leave it on all year. and you're not going to get caught out in those in-between months where it could change from summer to winter in one day.
Yeah.
Or, one day it's sunny, the next day you get up and it's freezing cold and you're sliding all over the road, it's greasy and frosty in the morning. Those sorts of, say, inconsistencies, I think for the UK make all season perfect. And I think over time, and we've seen massive growth in the sector, and when I say massive growth, if you think we're in a flat market, the car park isn't growing particularly, therefore the tyre sales aren't growing. It's a fairly flat market in the UK. And we've seen all season grow in smaller sizes around 11, 12, 13% growth year on year over the last 5 years. In 15, 16-inch sizes, we've seen more like 33% growth year on year. And in 17-inch and above, so we're talking higher performance cars and small SUVs upwards, 66% growth year on year. So this is suddenly exploding. Once you've tried them, you don't go back. Maybe you tried winter and thought, these are amazing, but I can't really leave them on all year because they're going to wear out quicker, or I don't know what's going to happen in the summer if I leave these on. In actual fact, in our climate, we don't have 40-degree summers either, so probably you could leave winters on all year. But now we've got this product. It might be a little bit more expensive, but you can go out there, put it on, and say, well, I don't have to worry about it now. I know I can get around in winter, and I can leave it on all year.
I found the wear property is quite good on them as well, in that they not really gone, these are wearing much quicker than a normal sort of summer tyre.
I think the only consideration is you might think about changing them earlier, because once they start to get down to sub 4 mil, 3 mil, you're starting to lose some of that tread movement in the winter. But if, for example, you were changing your tyres roughly once a year, just as an example, change them in October. You've got newish tyres during the winter, and you can leave them on all the rest of the summer. But no, the wear isn't that bad. Again, if we had, balmy hot summers for months on end, where your tyres were going sticky, you might be worried about wearing out quicker in the summer. But as I said, we stretched that performance envelope to mean that they are performing in the summer, but not. The question mark has been about some really high performance cars, and the last iteration of the tyres we're now developing is we've stretched it all that way. So we now have a range of high performance and SUV all season tyres, the largest range in the marketplace, and saying to those drivers of performance vehicles, you can fit all season and leave them on all year without any performance drag. Now, if you're going to go to the track, you're going to do a track day, and you're going to go sideways on the track, you're going to put summer tyres on. In fact, you're going to put track day tyres on. Yeah. But in terms of people are using 911s as an everyday vehicle, and they certainly don't want to end up off the side of the road or in the middle of a roundabout. So, I think we've really stretched it now to see that this is going to be, this will become the normal tyre.
The normal tyre, yeah.
So would you have no reservation at all putting an all season tyre on something like a 911 and just driving that, in anger all year? Is that where the technology is up to with that, do you think?
Joe, it depends on your definition of anger. I think if you're using it like most people do with a 911, which is the driving like a normal car, and yes, you're doing sustained speeds on the motorway, and you might do a few country lanes, but you're not going broadsiding it around a track.
No.
Yes, that's exactly what the tyres are designed to do. That's exactly what they're designed to do. They are the right speed rating, the right load rating, and the right performance characteristics tuned for that car. Just they're all season. It means you can do that in colder weather, in colder months, cold and wet weather.
Karl, as like somebody that's outside of the Goodyear, Michelin, and Pirelli dynasty, if you like, of N-rated deals with Porsche, what do you make of the N-rated system? Is it marketing, or is there a science to
There's
this?
A little bit of science. Again, it depends how scientific you want it to get.
A little bit of science and a lot of marketing, or
I'd say, one thing you've got to understand: if you pick a size like 245 4019 or something, what we call a 245 4019 doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly the same size as somebody else's 245 4019. They're nominal measurements, and there's a tolerance of about 10 mil either way: width, height of sidewall, diameter. I mean, they've got to fit on a rim, but usually the section width, as in how wide the tyre is, and how high the sidewall is, can vary a little bit. So if you've got a different tyre on every corner of a car, you've got a risk of straining some of the parts of the car, yes, because they'll have different rolling circumferences. But that's not actually much different from having some half-worn tyres on one axle and brand new tyres on another. You can manage a tolerance of about 5%. But one of the things manufacturers are saying, well, if you fit the tyres we've homologated, you know they are the right size, as in within the size specification, the right size. When we make a tyre that we know is going to go on a Porsche, we make it the same size as the Conti and the Michelin and the Pirelli that are OE. And legally speaking, there is no, there's nothing that stops you fitting a tyre. As long as it's the right load and speed in the season, the right tyre, you're legal, and there's nothing Porsche can do about it. Now, they will say, we've tuned these tyres to Porsche, and that to some extent that's true, but we've also tuned ours to tyres to Porsche. We just haven't homologated them to the original equipment.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So it is a little bit marketing. It's a way of driving you as a consumer, as a Porsche driver, back to a Porsche dealer, because they're more likely to have in stock the N-spec tyres, and the BMW garage is more likely to have the Star Mark tyres, and the Audi dealer is more likely to have the AO Mark tyres. All the manufacturers are doing it now, where they're saying, well, if you want the tyres we've homologated, you buy the tyres that we mark the sidewall accordingly. But in reality, it's if you're buying a quality brand that's reliable and it's the right load speed and markings, then you are perfectly safe to drive in those cars, perfectly within your rights to drive in those cars under the European competition law.
Fascinating insight that was, to be honest, with regards to the intricacies of N-rated tyres.
I could go a little bit further because there's a history to this. I keep going back to how long I've been in the industry, but we've always made tyres originally. The industry's always made tyres originally equipment for car manufacturers. But back in the day, we would have internal codes. So you'd make a tyre, let's say for a Ford, and it was OE, and it tweaked a little bit. Maybe they tweaked it to be a little bit quieter, or tweaked it to be slightly different handling characteristics for a particular car. And that would have a code then as a unique product that was made just for supplying that original equipment manufacturer. You might have the same size, load and speed made for a Vauxhall, and that would be tweaked slightly differently. By the time it got to replacement market, you'd throw them all in the same bin location in the warehouse, and it didn't matter which one you picked out. When a tyre dealer rang up and said, I want to buy that size, you just picked a tyre. We only had one code for aftermarket, which all of those OE codes fed into. So it was only really when Porsche started it with the original N-spec, saying, well, let's designate these tyres as Porsche homologated, ask the manufacturers to put a marking on the sidewall, and very quickly after that, Mercedes, BMW followed, BMW with an asterisk and Mercedes with an MO marking. But in reality, when you get to a car that's a couple of years old, those slight performance tweaks in the tyre, it might be that the replacement market tyre is better in some characteristics than others, because, as I said, they're all a compromise. If you increase one performance characteristic, you might reduce another. So it might be that there was slightly lower rolling resistance, but they might not have gripped as well. So we're talking quite small differences, so small that nobody would notice once you're buying it on the aftermarket. So that's why I'm so confident in saying, as long as you're buying off a reputable manufacturer that's not saying it's a 255 width when actually it's more like 245, and therefore the rolling circumference is going to be significant.
But that's what I mean. Then that's why it's a shame that with that in mind, if you, especially on a new vehicle, you deviate away from an N-rated product, you are invalidating large parts of your manufacturer warranty.
Not true. Porsche dealers might try and say that, and I've got to be careful there because I've got relationships with quite a few Porsche dealers. I spent many a year supplying them N-rated tyres when I was at previous jobs. You, legally speaking, they can't punish you for not fitting the N-spec tyres. We've got that in writing. We've
Excellent,
got that at European level. We've heard stories about, not just from Porsche, we've heard, let's say, salesmen saying you might not be insured properly, the warranty is going to be invalidated, that sort of stuff. If you drill down and you actually push them on it, that's not the case.
That's awesome for the consumer. That awesome.
We have this a lot. But you do have to be careful, because equally, when I was working in wholesale, we were supplying all of the car dealers in this country, because they all buy off wholesalers. they equally, like tyre retailers, looking to make a bit more margin. And you might get some car dealers that are selling straight from a premium brand. You've got a 1-year-old car coming in for its first service. And I'm talking about, I don't know, a Land Rover Sport or a Jag XE. And it's going out on, to all intents and purposes, budget tyres, because the dealer has said, oh yeah, they're just as good as the OE, but you can save 20, 30 quid a tyre. And the consumer doesn't know any different. Yeah. And they're thinking if the dealer's recommending it, then... So there's two extremes here. One is, let's say, overprotection of the other is, I still think you need to buy a quality brand that's got an R&D department that's investing in making tyres that are as good as the OE. And in other marks, is supplying OE. I mean, you have to reach a certain level of quality in your factories to supply any car manufacturer. You have to have a certain amount of quality control. So, you know, we aren't supplying Porsche, but we are supplying other car manufacturers with OE. So we've gone through those quality controls with Volkswagen Audi Group, for example. We're going through them because we're on the start of an OE journey. We're going from a replacement market only tyre to also having a mix of business. So, yeah, education is the key. Education is the key. And I could run through a list. There's 20 different sidewall markings for different car manufacturers. There's Alfa Romeo, there's Lexus, there's all sorts of stuff now that have got separate markings, but it's very, very small differences.
Yeah, I think from a Porsche point of view, that's excellent information you've been able to impart on us and our listeners, particularly with regards to that N-rated conundrum that some people, I mean, that sort of thing absolutely is a factor in whether people buy a certain tyre or not. I think whether it's a summer tyre or a winter tyre, people are very fearful of deviating away from N-rated spec.
I think there's always,
for that reason.
There's always going to be those people that are still fearful of it because it's that sort of almost like an old wives' tale. I mean, a lot of people are, will go for whatever because something like is it the Michelin 4S's, they're not homologated for a lot of Porsche sizes, but a lot of people will use them because they're regarded as some of the
homologated on another size,
and they're regarded as some of the best tyres out there for that sort of use. Yeah. So
it's not black and white, gents. I think the key is here. You have to think. Everybody's got to make their own choice. And to some, I think OE tyre manufacturers investing a lot of money in getting homologation with certain vehicles deserve a little bit of protection, at least on the first change.
Yeah.
They've invested to put their tyres on that car for the hope of getting the first, maybe even second replacement. The tyres going into an OE deal are not profitable. They're selling them, if not at a loss, then at very low profits. But the whole point is to get your tyres on that vehicle, associate your tyre brand with that vehicle, but also get like-for-like replacement. Somebody's replacing just an axle set and they want the same that's on the back.
Get a puncher.
And I think there should be some protection in the first phase of the life of that vehicle, and you probably should be going for the best brands in the marketplace. Of course, I would put our brand up there with the best because I know when we look at those magazine testing and all of those sorts of things, we're up there in the top 3 with Goodyear, with Continental, with Michelin.
I've seen the reviews of your Quattro Pro. They've done very, very well this year.
Yeah, and that's a testament to how much we invest in R&D. We have people in our OE department and our R&D and tyre development departments that have been at Michelin, been at Pirelli, been at Bridgestone. We've got a long history of technical excellence firsts. I won't turn this into an advert for us, but the list of first we have in the marketplace. First winter tyre to be WY rated, first all season tyre to be Y rated. We are, we're up there with those manufacturers. The only difference is nobody's heard of us in this marketplace, whereas we now need to try and turn that around and make people realise where we are in terms of quality of product, and as we grow with OE, and that will help us, grow the awareness.
I had a set of what was it? I think it was actually an Audi A4 that I had, and I bought. You could either get extra load tyres or not extra load tyres. It was an Audi A4 Estate 1.9 turbo diesel, and for some reason I decided to go for the non-XL ones. I found that it was quite a soft kind of ride on it. Actually quite liked it. It had a bit of movement to it. But, you see the same size tyres some with XL and some without. What does that mean?
It actually means that they're designed to carry an extra heavy load, and by that I mean, we saw through the sort of 90s into the 80s this explosion of diesel engine cars, 2-litre diesels from Volkswagen, Audi, BMW, you name it. These are heavy blocks of metal on the front of the car.
Yeah. And
at OE level, it started to be seen that you needed a slightly more rigid tyre to improve the handling, but it also has an effect on safety as well, because every time a tyre rotates, the sidewall flexes. The footprint, the sidewall bends, and normally it's the air pressure in the tyre that reduces that or minimises that to the level it's designed to do. It's only designed to flex a certain amount. If you've not got enough air in, it'll flex too much. It overheats, and you get a problem in the sidewall, known as overloaded or underinflated tyre wear, and it can be quite dangerous. If your tyre's not capable of carrying the weight the car's got, you'll get the same thing. The tyre is flexing too much, it'll overheat. So if the OE fit was extra load, the car's been designed to have extra load, and for safety reasons, you should have extra load, because it's a reinforced sidewall that will be able to take that extra weight.
Right.
We see a lot of this in 17, 18-inch on German diesels, where if it's got slightly too little pressure in, you'll see overloaded, underinflated wear, which means the inside of the tyre gets too hot, the shoulder area where it flexes gets too hot, and you can have failures. So it's about the weight of the car as well as the handling.
So I was probably doing the wrong thing then, running non-XL tyres on that car.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of risk there, because if you were doing an hour and a half on the motorway at of course 70 miles an hour exactly, that tyre builds up quite a lot of heat, and you can imagine how many times it's flexing a second as it's rotating. If it's bending too much, because in the sidewall it's not just rubber, it's metal. It's got metal wire in there. We've all learned this from USB leads and lightning cables, that if they get bent a bit too much, they stop working. Something inside breaks. Copper wire, metal wire in a tyre is the same thing. If you bend it too much, it'll break.
And that, I think a lot of people forget to check their tyre pressures, don't they? I've certainly seen a few people driving almost on flat tyres, and that's when you're really exercising the tyre, because that wall is flexing all the time and getting hot.
Yeah, but we're back to the same problem. Safety isn't sexy. So you talk to people.
Is that your strap line?
No, it's not. It's the bane of my life. We like to educate consumers. We invest as an industry a lot of money in an organisation called Tyre Safe to try and educate consumers about tyre safety. And we talk about checking, tyre pressures once a week or before a long journey. But how many people are actually doing it?
Well, this is
when we go out and do studies, nobody does it. Especially now we've got TPMS, because they'll say, well, the car will tell me.
That's it, yeah.
Actually, a 5 or 10% under inflation, which isn't a lot. If you're saying maybe the recommended pressure is 35 psi, if you're 10% under, you're talking about 3.5 psi. So you're still over 30. You'd say, well, that's fine. I'll do it another day.
Yeah.
At 10% underinflated, the increase in temperature of the sidewall of the tyre, and the behaviour of the tyre in terms of performance, and the fuel economy are all vastly affected. And the tyre life, the life of the tyre, can be reduced by something like 30% with just a 5 or 10% underinflation. So we say to people, it's not just safety, it's about value for money, it's about getting the tyre to behave as it should, it's about performance, but it's a hard message, it's a hard message to get across.
Yeah.
You'd think an easier one would be change your tyres when they're worn out, but it doesn't happen. You go into any tyre dealer in the country and look at their scrap pile, the tyres they've taken off and put to one side to go away to be recycled, disposed of or recycled.
Yeah.
And the vast majority are illegal. They're well below the legal limit, and I would say without a doubt, every single one of them is below 2 mil. Now the legal limit is 1.6, but the difference between 1.6 and 2 mil is like the breadth of a hair. You're not talking about a lot, but you've got down to 2 mil.
Yeah.
But again, it's back to this getting your money's worth. I'm not changing them until I absolutely have to. And if you want the story, when we started putting silica in tyres, we realised we can actually make tyres another colour than black. because the carbon black is what makes a tyre black. Natural rubber is like a beigey brown colour.
Okay.
So we had some technical boffins saying, well, you know what we could do? We could put a layer of rubber in the tyre at 1.6 mil, so that when it gets to that level, you could put a layer of rubber that's bright red. But of course, the marketing people said, that's a nightmare of an idea. Nobody's going to buy it. Because they'll think, well, what if I'm just in that circumstance where I haven't got around to changing it, and the police can see from 100 yards away I've got illegal tyres on? I don't want that. I don't want that product. I'll have one that's all black.
That's the thing. It's a great idea, but it needs like a pan industry approach to that, brought in by legislation, doesn't it?
It's also very expensive as well. Even Pirelli put a little bit of red on some of the sidewalls, some of their Rosso tyres, and it's extremely expensive manufacturing process to put coloured rubber in. But that again, it illustrates the attitude we have towards tyres as a community. Is we all know how important they are, we all know they're safe, but we see vast swathes of the community trying to save money, not necessarily buying the right tyre for the type of car or driving they do, buying part-worn tyres, buying used tyres, because they're going to save a few quid, which all the studies show they don't actually, because you how many mil of rubber you're getting for how much you're paying for. It's actually a false economy. Plus, they're all the danger of getting a tyre that's not been repaired properly or has been run overloaded, underinflated, and it's very hard to see that. You need an expert to look inside the tyre and spot that. And some let's say back of a car wash tyre guy is selling them at 20 quid each, and you think you're saving money. But anyway, we're going off again. So other sidewall markings, date code is one people don't necessarily know is there.
Date codes,
So every tyre that's manufactured under is under EU regulations, not necessarily made in the EU, but it's going to be sold in the EU. It has to have certain things on the sidewall. One of the things is country of origin. One of the things is a date code. So every tyre has on it the date it was manufactured. So it's not always easy to spot. It's a 4-digit number. It'll be somewhere on both sides of the tyre normally, or definitely on one side. No, both sides of the tyre. And it follows a dot code. So there's a big long number that begins DOT, but the last 4 digits are the date code. And the date code is the week number and the year. So I think we're in week 46 currently. So if a tyre was made this week by any manufacturer in the world, it will be date coded 4620. Okay. So when you're buying a used car, you could look around on the tyres and say, how long have they been on there for? Are they the original equipment on an 8-year-old car? Well, I probably should be thinking about changing them. You might find on a front-wheel drive car, the back axle sometimes can last a very, very long time. But if they've been on there that long, maybe you should be thinking about saying, well, I'll put a full set on.
There was an interesting story from our last podcast. Paul has got a 959, and it was at Porsche having a service, and they said, it's got 4-year-old tyres on it. It really should be looking at changing those. And he asked them what the date code was on the new ones, and I think it was 3 years old. So he decided maybe not.
It's not a black and white area. Because if somebody says to me, how long will a tyre last? What is the, let's say, the expiry date of a tyre?
What's your view on that?
There isn't one, because it depends what life it's had. If it's been in a warehouse, if it's been in my warehouse or a manufacturer's warehouse in the dark, not exposed to outside conditions, not exposed to ozone necessarily, in fresh air like by the seaside, something like that. If it's stored in the right way, it's pretty much it's indefinite lifespan. As soon as it gets out being used, and it's changing temperature every time it's used, it warms up, cools down, it's out in the elements, it's in the rain, it's in the wind. It's particularly when there's ozone degrades natural rubber, so you see it by the seaside, you see it on caravans, you see a drying of the natural rubber, it goes brittle, it cracks. You can sometimes see that in the sidewall where the flexing takes place. You can sometimes see it in the base of the tread rubber. All of those things have an effect.
So
buying a tyre that's been stored properly, that's 3 or 4 years old, isn't necessarily a problem. Having a car having a tyre on a car for 4 years because it's done low mileage or not necessarily been driven that hard, you'd start to say, well, I ought to be changed. If you're looking on a car and it's 4 or 5 years old, and you look at the tyres and they're 4 or 5 years old, they're probably the original equipment that came on the car, the rear axle.
Yeah.
That's something you need to be considering changing.
Is it different if you've got if it's a weekend drive that's in a nice heated garage at home and it gets pulled out 2 or 3 times a year type thing, but they're 5 years old, 10 years old, is that where do you still get this sort of they sort of degrade because they're in just normal atmosphere? Is that kind of the general?
Not if it's in a garage, it's much different to being out in the elements. I mean, wind and rain, you don't think it's doing anything, but then you look at the British coastline and realise that's what shapes the coastline. It's the weather itself is harsh, and it has an effect on rubber. If you bought a bit of natural rubber, or a razor, as the Americans would call it, you stuck it outside your house and you left it there a year, it wouldn't look the same as it did when you put it there a year later.
True. Yeah.
Just being in the wind and rain.
Just a scary thought, that. And
if you kept it in the dark in the house, a year later it's still in the same as when you bought it.
Yeah, so, very true.
And that's without the temperature change every time you use it. So yes, we have classic car customers that will keep their cars, under a sheet in a garage, for a long, long time. At the end of the day, the answer to that question, Andy, sorry, Joe, you look at the tyres because you can see the rubber starts to change colour, it starts to be slightly greyer. You might see some very, very fine cracking start to appear on the surface. And that's when you know it's time to change.
How about when the tyres you've sat the car in the same spot all winter, and you talk about flat spotting? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, definitely. Because again, you've bent the wire and the rubber in the tyre to a certain extent.
Okay, so it's the metal that's.
And the rubber. It's changed. It's changed temperature day and night as the temperature's changed, and it's sort of stayed in that position. I mean, it's meant to have a certain amount of elasticity. So what you should really do is move the car every now and then. Every few weeks, roll it forward. Yeah. One half a rotation or a quarter of a rotation, just to even that out. But yeah, the flat spotting is a real thing. If it's been left too long, you're just going to have to scrap that and say, well, I'm not.
Okay.
You have to ride around on it so long, like a Flintstones car on square wheels. You're taking a risk again.
But does the idea of storage, does that play into the idea of winter tyres? Because if people are thinking, well, if I've got to buy winter tyres as well, I've got to, say, make 2 tyre purchases in a year, or at least double my tyre spend. Yeah. Well, actually, if you're rotating the tyres and then storing them for X amount of months of the year, then actually those 2 sets should have a greater kind of sense of longevity to them. Is that right? Or
without doubt, yeah. You would, if you were doing it every year, and we've seen this, in other countries in Europe, not necessarily the UK. Although we tried it in the UK many times, when we've had 2 or 3 bad winters, we see an uptake. We see consumers asking for it more, and we see dealers trying to offer that sort of service because. Yeah. Call it a tyre hotel. A retailer will say, retailers that are really pushing winter will say, well, we'll store your summer tyres during the winter, and then when we swap them over in March, we'll store your winter tyres for the summer. And that's all part of the price, but it's also, it guarantees you're going to come back, because your tyres are there. So it's built into the service, and that's copied from the continent. And like I said, in the continent, it might even be a wheel change. Because they might, in extreme countries, they'd go from a nice, sexy alloy wheel and put some steel wheels on with wheel covers during the winter, and then swap back to the nice alloys in the summer.
You see that a lot.
But as we've tried it, we've then seen 4 or 5 winters where it doesn't snow at all, and people lose it. And going back to your question, Lee, the average length of time people keep a car is actually sometimes shorter than the time they'll then get through 2 sets of tyres.
That's true, yeah.
So if you're doing enough mileage that normally you get through a set of tyres every 2 years, if you're suddenly using 2 sets of tyres, that's 4 years. You might have changed your car then. And I hear a lot of the dealers say they've got warehouses full of tyres nobody's been back for because they've sold the car in the meantime and they've never been back for them. They don't know what to do with them,
So going back then,
but there is an inconvenience as well. So there's a slight cost because you've got to pay fitting and mounting every time you take them back. There's an inconvenience in doing that, and you see that in countries in the continent where this happens. You've got to book in advance because it's the busiest time of the year. Most of the tyres are sold in those 2 periods. So actually, dealers get really, really busy. It's not good for the trade, particularly because in the months when it's not swap over time, you're quite quiet. Because other than a puncture, you're not doing anything. It evens out in terms of tyre life. It doesn't even out in terms of overall cost because you're paying for mounting and fitting. So one of the arguments used in other countries for all season is you will save money because you're not going to change tyres twice a year.
Yeah.
It's not really a relevant argument here because we don't do that anyway. But we would certainly say if you want safety all year round and you want to enjoy the car you bought all year round, then the all season is the way to go rather than a swap. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I was I was coming round to that because we were talking about winter tyres and summer tyres, and the all-season tyre does seem to be the way to get around all of those issues and have something that's suitable for the majority of the year in the UK. And I guess we haven't, we didn't sort of finish off is what's the difference between an all-season and a winter tyre and a summer tyre?
Good question.
It's again not a straight answer because they vary by manufacturer. So you can have, if you said an all season is obviously sitting somewhere between summer and winter, you have some summer orientated all season tyres, and manufacturers aren't even calling them all season; they're calling them something slightly different.
Like the Uniroyal rain tyre type thing?
No, like Michelin are calling their version of an all-season tyre cross climate.
Okay, yeah.
Saying it's not an all-season tyre; it's a summer tyre with winter capabilities.
Okay, yeah.
Most of the other manufacturers, us included, have steered our tyres more along the winter tyre capability, but you can leave them on all year, and you're not going to sacrifice performance in the summer. And when you see the tyre testings in the magazines, you can see what they do is they have a test tyre at both ends of the spectrum. So they'll run a test on all season for a range of manufacturers, but they'll run a datum level summer tyre and a datum level winter tyre at either end to see where in each of the performance characteristics, dry braking, dry handling, wet braking, wet handling, aquaplane resistance, all of those things, and compare it to where on the spectrum between winter and summer it goes. And of course, as a marketing organisation, you choose where you want to put your product in that spectrum. The latest range of all season we've been launching and into our latest winter tyres have moved more towards wet performance.
Okay.
So we were doing really well in the snow, but we were getting marked down in tests for wet performance. So we've opened up the grooves a little bit. We've given them slightly better water evacuation. Again, we've used some waxes and some polymers that improve wet grip because actually winters are getting milder across Europe. Because of global warming, we're seeing less severe winters. It's more about cold wet than it is about deep snow in most countries. So in the countries that still get 3 months of snow, they're still going to buy winter tyres. In fact, in Scandinavia, they buy ultra winter. There is a category of tyre called Nordic winter.
So they
which are even more winter.
Tyres and
then you've got studdable tyres where you can actually put studs in them because for 3 months of the year they're driving on compact snow and solid ice. But yes, you've seen this, let's say, market-specific products now, and for northern Western Europe, or down into the continent, around the Med, other than in the mountains, we see, you could have a day in June that's not much difference to a day in November.
Yeah, very true.
In terms of temperature or weather. So it's unpredictable. You want to have the right tyres on whatever time of the year you're on. Therefore, we're going for a product that sits somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So we've got a similar level of capability in the snow, maybe not quite as good as winter. Maybe instead of having 4 sipes in a block, you've got 3 sipes in the block, but you've still got sipes in the block. But it's about actually expanding the compromise performance envelope. Instead of having to sacrifice one thing for something else, you can, as R&D improves, you can actually gain without losing too much in another. So all season over the last 2 or 3 product iterations has got better and better and better. Some of the magazines that turned their nose up at it and said, it's just a winter tyre marketed as all season, are now saying, well, these things perform in the summer very, very, very comparable to a summer tyre in the dry. So I think we're achieving what we set out to achieve, which is to try and give one product that satisfies all those needs.
Okay, so I think, like, to sort of sum it up, I'd like to say that tyre capabilities are all about compromise. So if you've got a summer tyre, that's going to be great in a hot sort of situation, give you lots of grip. A winter tyre is going to be great in snow and real harsh stuff. An all season is a compromise between the two, but the technology is improving so much that those compromises are getting less, so that all of those tyres are more capable each year, and the all season is a real sort of good day-to-day tyre.
I go as far as to say, if you want the absolute best performance in the winter, you'd put a winter tyre on. And if you want the absolute best performance when it's dry and warm every day, it's more than 7 degrees, every day it's 15, 16 to 20, 25 in the UK, and you drive quite hard and you really want to be you are pushing the performance envelope in terms of the tyres and your vehicle. And if you want the absolute best, you'll swap. You'll have that inconvenience of saying, I'm going to have summer tyres on in the summer and have winter in the winter. Yeah. It means that if you have a cold day in the summer where it throws it down with rain, actually, those summer tyres, it's about like track day tyres. Some of the manufacturers make road legal track day tyres, which are designed to be able to put them on.
Joe's got some of those on his car. They're sketchy as hell. But then
be able to drive to the track legally. That's all they've been designed to do. They'll be able to. You are in theory road legal to put them on the car at home and drive to the track, because there's probably not enough room in the car to fit 4 tyres and wheels in the back.
That's it.
Change them out the track. But if you drove around on them every day, you're going to. If it's warm and dry, you're going to think this car's fantastic and it drives like some rails. If you've got a bit of rain, you've got your life in your hands, and that's the real end of the summer performance envelope. Most summer tyres are clearly not that extreme, but high performance summer tyres are still designed to be used in the dry, but they've got tread on them. They're not slicks. They've got tread on them for if it rains. As soon as it gets cold, the rubber capabilities start to not be the same, and you are not going to get as good a performance as you are on a tyre that's designed for cold weather. Right at the other end of the spectrum, you're in a country where you get a lot of snow. It's very dependent. You're in an area of this country, like northern Scotland. We still sell a lot of winter tyres up there, where you're going to get months and months of very cold weather and quite a bit of snow. You probably put winter on. You might leave winter on all year round, but you put winter on rather than all season. We have stretched that compromise so that at either end, we are not sacrificing as much. And the difference between an out-and-out summer tyre and an all-season summer, and an out-and-out winter tyre and all-season in winter, has narrowed quite significantly.
Pucker. All right, Karl. And look, I've got one more question to finish. How are tyres recycled? Because I've always been under the impression that it's with difficulty.
It is with difficulty. It's an area where we are pushing. We have an organisation in the industry, which is the Tyre Recovery Association. We work very closely with the Department of the Environment. The vast majority of tyres in the past were landfilled, and they were landfilled whole. There were pictures of beautiful parts of the countryside with a massive great hole full of tyres. The law changed that you couldn't landfill tyres whole, you had to shred them first, and then the law changed again that you couldn't landfill them even shredded. So the industry had to find some alternative solutions. Unfortunately, we're in a global market, and if somewhere at the other side of the world is willing to take those tyres and throw them in a hole for less money than it costs you to recycle them in the UK, you end up jeopardising that recycling industry and the kind of companies that will invest in the technology to recycle them, because it's cheaper for somebody to get rid of them by putting them on a container and sending them to India. So we've still been faced with challenges. Gradually, that's changing. We've seen one major outlet for the last 10 years, which is cement kilns. So they're using tyres instead of other sources of fuel, because tyres are very high energy. There's a lot of carbon, burnable within the tyre. There's a lot of energy that can be released with heat. And actually, there's other chemicals in there that help the cement process, the chemical process of making cement. So there was quite a good uplift in terms of getting rid of casings in cement, and an awful lot are crumbed and are used for things like sports pitches, playgrounds. Much more prevalent in the States than it is here, but it's growing here, all weather pitches. And there is an industry there. And very latterly, there's been a process called pyrolysis, whereby you're reversing the process of vulcanization, separate component parts, and you can actually start to recover some chemicals that can be reused elsewhere. So you can recover carbon black, you can recover certain things back out of the tyres. But we've had these competing elements. We've got people who will throw them out, literally fill a van of tyres and then just ditch them in a field somewhere. You've got people that will set light to a pile of tyres. They pretend they're going to recycle them and then they set fire to them. People that will shove them on a boat and send them to another country and say that's their problem to sort out. But gradually, law has tightened, things have changed, and we're starting to see, some. There's got to be a viable business for someone to invest some money and know they can make money out of it, and that's starting to happen with some of the reprocessors now, and some of the new things like pyrolysis could give us even more outlets. What will happen eventually is the government will turn around to tire manufacturers and say, you need to sort this problem out. You need to pay enough money if you're bringing tyres into the market. They've done it with chemicals in fridges. They've done it. They're going to do it with plastic packaging, and they'll do it with tyre manufacturers eventually. They'll say you need to pay enough money into a pot so that we as a society can solve this problem in an environmentally friendly way.
Yeah.
And we need to find those business outlets. So you actually find some of the tyre manufacturers have got investments in some of those recycling developments because it's a whole life thing.
Yeah.
Of course, in truck tyres, we reuse them 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, they get retreaded a lot.
Quality truck tyre casing, not a cheap import from somewhere else. But if it's a quality casing, it can have 3 or 4 treads put on it. We call them retreads. We used to have car retreads years ago, and that got wiped out by cheap Chinese product. The tyres are quite a robust thing, and that's reuse, and the whole recycle. I think reuse is better than even recycle. If you can get more life out of it.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you very much for taking us through that. We've got one last thing to go through. You very kindly offered a set of tyres to one of our listeners, which is extremely amazing. Thank you very much.
If somebody's going to sit and listen to all the very detailed discussion I've just done on tyres, then I deserve to have some sort of reward. But they could get a free set of tyres. So I'd love to offer up a free set of tyres to
awesome.
To one of your listeners as a prize. You guys can think up a method by which you can you can run some sort of competition. And
we're going to do that.
Of the car, we'll offer a set of tyres, and I'd love them to try some all season.
Excellent.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Karl, definitely. And I have to say as well, lots learned there, Karl. And what a pleasure it is to converse with somebody who has such an intrinsic knowledge of the industry they specialise in. It genuinely was fascinating for me. So thank you for sharing that with all of us at Road to Redline.
Yeah,
I'm not sure my wife would agree with you about the fascinating bit.
Well, I bet it comes in handy when he comes to renewing the tyres. So,
excellent. Thank you very much for your time.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity, guys. Like I said, it's really nice to be able to talk to car enthusiasts about what is a very important part of the car.
Yeah, spot on, absolutely spot on. Nice one. Cheers, Karl. Take care. Have a good one.